Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new deep dive. And today we're really getting into it. We're talking about love.
Well, not just love, right? We're talking about the surprising ways love shows up when we think about ethics, how we build community, even the way we approach our everyday work.
Man, layers. And the excerpts you all sent in from Oliver O'Donovan, wow. Theological and philosophical, he does not hold back.
That's true. O'Donovan, he's not afraid to tackle the big questions. And he does it in a way that weaves together these different fields, theology, philosophy, into something that feels surprisingly cohesive.
Right. Like we all kind of have that gut feeling about love. Hear a favorite song, see a picture of your dog, boom, love.
Right. The good stuff.
Yeah. Even Brahms tried to capture that feeling, that this is awesome feeling, in his 4 serious songs.
And he nailed one aspect of love, for sure. But, as O'Donovan points out, even Brahms, composing those beautiful melodies, he might have missed something crucial about love, especially in the context of music.
You mean there's this whole other dimension of love happening in the collaboration itself, the way the musicians are listening to each other, responding, creating something together?
Exactly. That's where this deep dive gets really interesting. O'Donovan, in his book, Entering into Rest, throws us a curveball right off the bat. He wants us to see love not just as this feeling we have, but as the bedrock of ethical action.
So it's deeper than just following the rules. Like, love is the why behind it all.
Exactly. He even says, and this quote floored me, he says, "Love offers the final validation of moral reason. It answers the larger question, which ethics can pose but cannot answer, about the validity of moral reason in the world, the question referred to by philosophers as why bother being good."
Whoa. Okay, so instead of love being the outcome of being good, it's the thing that gives our good actions meaning in the first place.
It flips the script completely.
Yeah.
And if we follow that thread, even the idea of God as love takes on this whole new meaning.
Because if God is love, and love is the source of ethical behavior, then doing good, it's almost like tapping into this universal truth, not just checking things off a list, you know?
Yes, it's about aligning ourselves with something bigger, something more fundamental than just a set of rules.
I can feel that. Have you ever felt that tension, though? Like, you're doing the right thing, but it's not really coming from a place of love.
It's a struggle, for sure. And that's what I think is so powerful about this deep dive. It suggests that love and ethical action, they might be way more connected than we realize.
So how does this love actually show up in the real world? It can't just be this, like, abstract idea, right?
Of course not. Think about it this way. You have a philanthropist, right? Donating millions to help others, acting on what they see as good. But then you have someone robbing a bank. Maybe they even justify it by saying they're doing it for their family, also a perceived good.
Right, so how do we differentiate? They both thought they were doing good.
That's where communication comes in. O'Donovan would say the difference is how that good is communicated, how it's shared.
So just having good intentions locked up in our heads isn't enough.
Exactly. He uses this interesting concept of lending when he talks about God's love. He says God doesn't hoard this goodness, but lends it out through communication, through action that ripples out and creates meaning.
Wow, that's beautiful. It makes me think about my everyday interactions in a totally different way. It's not just about me following my own moral code, it's about how my actions affect the people around me.
Yes. Recognizing that we're all part of this web, and our actions, no matter how small, they contribute to this shared experience of goodness, or the opposite.
Okay, so this next part dives into something that seems totally unrelated at first glance, and that is sanctification. I know that probably sounds very religious, maybe even a little intimidating.
It definitely has a long history in theological circles, yeah? But stick with us, because O'Donovan connects it back to our everyday lives in a way that might surprise you.
So he's not talking about, like, being perfect all the time.
Not even close. He's saying that God's work, this divine sanctification, it's woven into the very fabric of our lives, even the messy parts.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me more.
Well, he uses this beautiful image of God's work being revealed through those small moments of thanksgiving we experience.
Wait, so something as simple as feeling grateful, that can be an example of experiencing the divine.
Exactly. It's about being present in our lives and recognizing those little glimpses of grace, those moments that point to something bigger than ourselves.
That is a beautiful way to look at it. Reminds me of that whole stop and smell the roses thing, finding those moments of awe in the everyday.
And recognizing how those moments connect us to something larger, as you said.
Okay, but it wouldn't be a real deep dive if we didn't wade into some of the more challenging stuff. And this next section tackles a big one, suffering.
It's something we all face. And it often leaves us feeling powerless, questioning whether anything we do even matters.
Yeah, it's like in Milton's sonnet about going blind, he's wrestling with this feeling of being useless, of being robbed of his ability to create, to contribute.
It's such a raw, honest expression of how suffering can shake us to our core, make us question our purpose. But O'Donovan offers a really interesting perspective here.
I'm listening.
He says our work has meaning, not just because it creates some lasting impact, but because it's part of a much larger story, a story that includes both creation and redemption.
So it's not about striving for immortality through the things we create.
Not necessarily. He actually challenges that very idea, that only things with lasting impact are valuable. He talks about the importance of what he calls cumulative work.
Cumulative? What does that mean?
It's this idea that our efforts build on each other, even if the results seem temporary or insignificant on their own. Think of it like, building a bridge. Each brick matters, even though you might not see the finished product yet.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
But there's an interesting counterpoint to this idea of cumulative work from another scholar, Miroslav Volf. Volf says that in order for work to build on itself, something tangible needs to remain.
So are Volf and O'Donovan on the same page here?
That's the thing. They're both wrestling with these big questions, but from different angles. O'Donovan would say, even if the results of our work fade away, the effort itself still holds meaning.
So how do we make sense of that? How do we find meaning in those efforts that don't result in something concrete, something lasting?
That's where O'Donovan brings us back to the concept of resurrection.
Okay, I think we need to unpack that a bit. But before we do, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt like your work didn't matter because it wasn't creating something permanent?
It's a common feeling, especially in a world obsessed with productivity and leaving a legacy. But what if, as O'Donovan suggests, meaning isn't about permanence, but about being part of something so much bigger than ourselves? It can be a tough thing to wrap your head around, for sure, especially in a world that's always telling you to build something bigger, something that lasts. But O'Donovan's asking us to find the meaning in the doing, in the connections we make, in the love we put out there, even if the results are fleeting.
It's like when you bake a loaf of bread for a friend. The joy is in the making, in the sharing, even though you know the bread itself is temporary.
Exactly. And to circle back to what I was saying about resurrection, he's not just talking about some far-off event. He sees it as a transformative power that's active right here, right now.
Okay, I think I see what you're saying. It's about finding the value in those things that are temporary, imperfect, the things that eventually just fade away, because the love we put into them, that was real.
Yes. It's like saying that, yeah, the bread eventually gets eaten, but that act of baking it, that was an act of love. And that love had a real impact, even if it wasn't permanent.
It's like all those little acts of kindness we see every day. They might not change the world, but they make someone's day. They put a little more good out there.
And each one of those little ripples, each act of love, it all adds up. It's part of this bigger story of redemption, of healing, even if we don't always see how it all fits together.
That's actually really encouraging, you know? It makes those everyday efforts feel more worthwhile.
Right. Takes the pressure off a bit. We don't have to build some grand legacy to live a meaningful life.
Totally. It's more about showing up every day and choosing love, choosing to act in ways that reflect our values, even in the small stuff.
And speaking of values, O'Donovan, he doesn't shy away from the flip side of all this either. He talks about the vices listed in 2 Timothy. They might surprise you.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, it's not your typical thou shalt not list. He talks about things like arrogance, recklessness, valuing money and pleasure above all else.
Yeah, those are pretty big ones. It's like he's saying those vices, they all stem from this place of self-centeredness, turning away from love towards, I don't know, a lesser version of ourselves.
It's a good way to put it. He presents it almost like a progression, starting with self-love and ending with this rejection of anything larger than ourselves, choosing, money, fleeting pleasure over something deeper, more meaningful.
It's like those vices, they lead to a kind of emptiness, a disconnect from the very thing that could actually fulfill us.
Exactly. And it's not about obsessing over every little mistake we make, but about cultivating a way of being that's more loving, more generous, more in tune with that deeper force O'Donovan talks about.
This is making me rethink my whole definition of sin. It's not just about breaking the rules, but about missing the mark when it comes to love.
I love that. Missing the mark.
Yeah.
Because it means we can always course correct, always come back to that center.
So how do we actually do that? How do we cultivate that kind of love? Resist those things that pull us away, especially when things get rough.
O'Donovan talks about communication, recognizing that true love. It shows up in how we interact with the world around us.
So it's not just an internal feeling, it's about putting it into action.
Exactly. Love is a verb. It's about how we treat each other, the choices we make every day.
So like holding the door for someone, helping a coworker with a project, those are all expressions of love.
Absolutely. And every time we choose selfishness or greed or trying to control others, that's expressing something that's not love.
Wow. This is really making me think about my actions, even the small ones. Because they all reflect, like, where I'm at with this whole love thing we keep coming back to.
That's a lifelong journey, that's for sure. But just being aware of it is a huge first step. And yeah, it's not always easy to choose love, especially when those other voices are so loud.
That is the truth. Before we jump into how to actually make those choices more consistently, what are your thoughts? Have you ever felt that tug of war between what you know you should do and what your heart is telling you to do?
Oh, absolutely. And I think O'Donovan would say those two things, our heads and our hearts. Maybe they're more aligned than we realize. It's just about learning to listen to that deeper wisdom, that pull towards love.
And what about friendship? Where does that fit into all of this?
Ooh, this is where it gets good. O'Donovan, he believes that friendship, in its purest form, is actually one of the most powerful expressions of love we experience. It connects us to something so much bigger than ourselves.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Tell me more.
So he looks at some of the classic texts on friendship, Aristotle, Cicero, and he pulls up this idea that true friendship, it's built on a shared love of virtue, this mutual desire to become better people.
So it's more than just like having fun together.
Way more. O'Donovan argues that real friendship has the power to transform us. It's about challenging each other to grow, to become more loving, more ethical people.
It's like having an accountability partner for your spiritual and moral growth.
I love that. He emphasizes how true friends encourage each other to pursue what's right and good, even when it's hard.
It's like what we were saying earlier about love being the foundation for ethical action. It's like friendship can be this training ground for actually putting that love into practice.
You got it. And he even goes further, connecting friendship to this idea of sanctification.
Wait, hold on. Sanctification? We're talking about hanging out with your friends, not like becoming a saint.
It sounds way more intense than it is, I promise. What O'Donovan is getting at is that authentic friendship, the kind built on mutual love and a desire to grow together, it can actually be a pathway to experiencing the divine.
So you mean like we get a taste of that bigger love, that connection to something larger than ourselves through our closest friends?
Exactly. He even uses the example of Jesus' friendships with his disciples as like the ultimate model.
Makes sense. Jesus was always pushing his disciples, challenging them to love more deeply, to live more fully.
Exactly. He offered them a friendship that was rooted in truth, in compassion, in this shared purpose.
Okay, I'm starting to see how friendship fits into this whole conversation about love and ethics and even this idea of experiencing the divine. But what about those relationships that are a little messier than that? You know, we all have those friends or family members where it's complicated, maybe even a little unhealthy.
That's true. And O'Donovan acknowledges that not all friendships are created equal. He stresses the importance of discernment, recognizing whether a certain friendship is actually helping you grow.
So it's okay to, set boundaries, even walk away from relationships that are no longer life-giving.
Sometimes that's the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for the other person. True friendship, it should always point us back to love, back to that deeper connection.
It's about recognizing which relationships feed our souls and which ones leave us feeling kind of empty.
Exactly. Having the courage to invest in the ones that lift you higher, that help you become the best version of yourself.
This is making me want to take a look at my own friendships, see which ones are helping me grow and which ones might be holding me back.
I think that's a great idea. It's easy to go through life on autopilot, but taking the time to really examine your relationships through this lens of love, it can be incredibly revealing.
Speaking of lenses, we've talked about love, we've talked about ethics, we've talked about friendship. What about communication? How does that fit in?
This is where O'Donovan gets really practical. He argues that how we communicate, how we use language to share meaning, it's a fundamental part of ethical action.
So it's not just about what we do, but how we express ourselves, how we connect with others through our words.
Exactly. He talks about the power of language to create, to build relationships, to shape our whole understanding of the world. But he also explores the potential dangers, too.
Right, because words can also be used to manipulate, to hurt.
Exactly. That's the shadow side of communication. And O'Donovan's interested in helping us navigate both. He even talks about the importance of what he calls correcting our language. He's drawing on the work of another scholar here, Jean-Yves Lacoste.
Correcting our language. Okay, what does that mean?
Well, Lacoste, he argues that humans have this unique ability to step back and analyze their language in a way that other animals just don't. We can reflect on the words we use and actually refine them, make them more accurate, more nuanced.
So it's not just about using language for our immediate needs, but about using it to understand and discuss these big concepts, ethics, love, even our spirituality.
Exactly. Lacoste and O'Donovan are pointing to this incredible capacity we have for abstract thought, creating meaning that goes way beyond our immediate experience.
And that ability is what allows us to even talk about these things, to grapple with the complexities of life and, our faith.
Exactly. It's part of what makes human communication so unique. But as we were saying before, there is a potential downside.
Because that same capacity for abstraction, it can also be used to distort reality, to mislead, to manipulate.
Exactly. And O'Donovan, he doesn't shy away from that darker side of language.
It's like that difference between using language to build bridges and using it to build walls.
What a powerful image. And that's the choice we face every time we open our mouths, isn't it? Are we building bridges or walls?
So how do we use our words to build those bridges? How do we communicate in a way that's ethical, loving, that helps us connect with each other on a deeper level?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's one that O'Donovan dives into with a lot of nuance. But before we get into his thoughts, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been on the receiving end of words that they felt like bridge building, Like you were really seen, really understood?
It really is amazing how powerful words can be. They can make you feel so connected or totally shut down.
And that goes right to the heart of what O'Donovan's saying about ethical communication, I think. It's not about memorizing a list of rules. It's about realizing how much weight our words carry and using them to make the world a more loving, more just place.
So how do we actually do that? How do we make sure we're building bridges, not walls, with the things we say?
O'Donovan talks about the importance of walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Our words should reflect what we actually believe and value, not just be empty platitudes.
Actions speak louder than words.
Right, exactly. When we back up what we say with how we live, our words mean so much more.
So it's not enough to just talk about love. We actually have to live it out in how we treat other people.
Exactly. O'Donovan wants us to remember that real love isn't just grand gestures or poetic words. It's the everyday stuff, how we treat each other, even in the smallest interactions.
This makes me think about how I communicate at work. I write and speak publicly a lot in my job, and it's so easy to fall into that trap of just trying to sound smart or persuasive.
I get that. And O'Donovan would probably say, even in those professional settings, the most effective communication and the most ethical comes from a place of being genuine, being real.
So even when I'm trying to be convincing, it needs to be based on truth, on actually wanting to connect with people and build understanding.
That's the goal, right? Using language to build connection, not to manipulate people.
And that idea of communicating ethically, it's bigger than just us as individuals, too.
Absolutely. O'Donovan also talks about the role of communities, especially churches, in shaping how we understand things like truth and love through preaching and teaching.
So it's not all on us to figure this out alone. We need places where we can grapple with these big questions together.
Yes. He really emphasizes having spaces for open, honest dialogue, where we can challenge each other and help each other grow in how we understand what it means to live a life rooted in love.
It's like those late night conversations with close friends where you really get into the big questions of life and help each other make sense of it all.
I love that. It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers, but we can learn and grow together through those authentic and sometimes messy conversations.
This whole deep dive has really been eye-opening. It's wild to think about how something as basic as language, the words we choose to use every day, can have such a big impact on the world.
Language is a powerful tool, capable of incredible good and incredible harm. It all comes down to the choices we make.
Choosing to use our words carefully, intentionally, with awareness of the power they hold.
O'Donovan wants us to remember, love should be the guiding principle for everything we do, and that includes how we communicate.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into this surprising sovereignty of love, I keep coming back to this question. If love is really this powerful force that shapes our ethics, our communication, even how we view work, what does it look like to really embrace love's restlessness?
That's a beautiful question to sit with. O'Donovan reminds us that true love is never stagnant. It's always growing, changing, looking for new ways to express itself.
So if we really want to live lives that are grounded in love, we can't just get comfortable. We have to be open to growing, changing, finding new ways to embody love in the world.
It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
But it's also an invitation to a richer, more meaningful, and ultimately more joyful life.
I love that. So to everyone listening, as you go about your day, your week, your life, I hope you'll ask yourself, how might embracing love's restlessness change how you approach your relationships, your work, even your own personal growth?
It's a question worth pondering.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll leave you with that thought. Until next time, keep diving deep.